Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, I had to just check that because when the vice president, he has the economic team, says the government has invested about $10 billion in infrastructure development in 3 years. So that clearly means that, look, they do identify how those challenges are. And if you invest that amount of money, it's a matter of time before you begin to see the results, isn't it?
Chamberlain, I've never argued about investment in capital projects, which the government, whether it's yesterday or today, is saying. But what I'm saying is, can we see the capital project? Is it not better that I come and say, like I use the example, we've invested $1 billion in Fort Mainland Bridge. We've invested $500 million borrowed money in doing the second Niger Bridge. We've invested this in, and show me the viability of those investments.
Okay, so the question, is the question about seeing the investment, the capital investment on ground, or the viability of the investment?
Both, because if you're going to borrow, if you're going to put those in a debt, we must see the benefit, the viability of such investment. You don't just go and borrow for the sake of borrowing.
You know, I asked that question because
I have been in finance. So in finance, you must borrow for critical areas that are viable.
I asked the question because there are those who will tell you the sukuk that was used to finance over 20 roads. You think that you're not seeing the roads that are being built and the rails?
You know, I've seen where people wrote roads here that are completed and everything, and I passed through those roads. They're not. If you want that, go and take it from Enugu Onitsha Road. You can't drive that road.
What about the Owerri Port Harcourt Road?
Well, I just use one example.
No, but I drive every day. Some part of that, yeah, but they're working on that road. I mean, some of us have been through some of those roads, and there's construction.
I don't know which side you have been. I saw even in China yesterday where they're showing Port Harcourt Aba Road. Yesterday, everybody was. So maybe Chamberlain was using a copter on the road, not that road.
Mr. B, in your earlier submission, you mentioned something about a development agenda.
Yeah.
A development plan. You talked about China borrowing money and putting into a development agenda. Let me ask you this. You were a governor for 8 years. Did you have a development agenda? And what do you think is the challenge with putting up a development agenda that we're not seeing it being put out?
It's very simple. When I got to Anambra State, they didn't have a Ministry of Planning at all, which means they didn't have any plan. I was the one who started the Ministry of Planning, got the President Deputy Governor to become the Commissioner for Economic Planning. And we developed the planning. We adopted, I didn't go looking far, we adopted MDG, Millennium Development Goals, clearly as our plan. And we, on our own, formulated our own system to achieve that plan, which we christened Anambra Integrated Development Strategy. And it was popular. Everybody in the state knew about it. And what was it? It was just a process that allowed us to plan properly around the goals, budget around the goals, ensure that the implementation and the execution of our projects are within the goals. And we moved our budgets, our planning and our budgeting, from being supply-driven to demand-driven.
So are you
so
saying
we went to the people.
Now you're saying that this is not happening in the country?
Tell me, I'm a Nigerian citizen, and I believe that at my stage, I should know and have an idea of what borrowing and everything, or where we have this, is going on.
Now I wonder how much corruption will weigh into this when you mentioned the war against corruption and made your submissions on it. But is the strategy of the war on corruption able to get Nigeria out of poverty today, since it's been established that there is a direct correlation between corruption and the level of poverty? And when you juxtapose that with the figures that we have,
let me tell you, there's no correlation. If there is, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, all this won't be where they are. Forget that. When you're not visionary and you're creating enough resource, you can look for everywhere. There's no correlation between that. I've said it before. It's like a situation where you have, say, a supermarket, and you have people who are coming to steal bits and pieces and everything. All you need to do is to put in structures that will make the stealing less. What we are doing in Nigeria is that we have closed the store and chasing those who have stolen goods. The consequence is that by the time you come back, then a lot of goods must have been expired and you've lost customers, you've lost this and everything. I'm not saying we shouldn't look for what was stolen or what is this or that is wrong. No. But we should be more focused on tomorrow, because tomorrow is more dynamic. Let's create an economy that can create a better future. Give people hope. Why we're saying this is wrong. And let me tell you, if you design a goal that is clear and empirical and measurable, you reduce corruption. For example, let me use the issue of education. Here, we have UBEC in Abuja. We have UBEC in the States. These are centers of transaction. You can, in Uganda, in Ethiopia, go to small Kenya, everything. Money is sent direct. We did it in Anambra State. Let the money move from ministry to school. Why would the school principal and the parents association supervise a building? But you know today they still give contracts for, say, UBEC say they are giving money to people, but the contract is that is awarded from Abuja to a secondary school in your village.
That's corruption.
Period. The more toll gates you put, the more corrupt.
Okay, but if I could bring this up, because I mean, they suggest two key strategies to ease our debt burden. One, they say, was to increase our non-oil revenue, and then second was to see if we could borrow and ensure that the debt service maybe at interest rate maybe 3% or less. That might just work. But we also do remember that in the recent stats that the NBS released, they say in Q1 of this year, I think the GDP growth was about 1.9%, and the non-oil sector accounted for 90.3% of that. Doesn't that indicate that we may just be having our debt sustainable?
Well, I don't want to talk about our GDP growth because...
I'm talking about the non-oil sector growth that accounted for 90% of that growth.
Yes, but even at that, if you can, Chamberlain, even if you go into it, even with that growth, it's very weak. It's not this thing. And the second quarter, what happened? It went down. And I can tell you, most of the sectors are so weak. I don't want to talk about growth, because when you talk about our growth, even when I listen to the minister say we're on the right track, you can't be on the right track when your GDP growth is 1.5%, where your population is growing about twice that.
So give us your quick suggestions. What should we be doing now?
Very good question. What we should be doing now is to have a clearly defined goals that will help us to ramp up our revenues in the right direction. There's nothing wrong in borrowing, but let's borrow and invest it in the productive sector that everybody can see, is measurable, and we can say this is what we're going to achieve with this. Let's look at the cost of governance, which we're not looking at and which we're shouting every day. Let's reduce the cost of governance to a place where you can see that we have a problem and we need to reduce this cost across the line. From the only reason why you're seeing people fight and nearly kill each other today in our election is because the cost of governance is too high and allows all sorts of things. If people are paying money, for example, to buy votes, they're going to collect that money somewhere. Right. So it becomes a trading business.
We'll approach the Ministry of Works. I know they published it before, but we'll go back and check those roads that have been done with the ones you haven't seen. So we'll bring them back and then take a look at them critically.
I saw one yesterday that you showed about Port Harcourt.
You've seen one.
You know,
all right.
And I'm going to drive across one today on the Enugu Road, and I'm going to tell you I'm
But
going to use the old road.
Okay.
Because the new one, but it's saying completed. It's not.
All right. We have to thank you for coming on this morning, Mr. Pt.3, former governor of Anambra State. We're back in a moment. It's still Independence Day in Nigeria. Join us again.